We're reading from Bhagavad Gita in second chapter, verse 13, for those of you following along. I think there's some Bhagavad Gitas too. We normally pass them out, so anyway, for those who'd like. So the second chapter is an extremely important chapter with regard to understanding that we are not this body, but we are eternal spirit soul. This chapter we often turn to in times of loss of loved ones, associates, and also to understand our own position in this world and in life. We oftentimes turn to the second chapter and read these verses when there is the dying or the passing on of those we are dear to. So I highly recommend for those of you who aren't so familiar with this area of Bhagavad Gita to study it. It'll be very helpful for you and for others as we make this transition. So this verse 13 is one of the primary verses that we refer to within the second chapter. So for those of us who would like to read the verse, to call and response, we can do so. Dehinosmin yatha dehe Kaumaram yauvanam jara Tatha dehantra praptir Yavastathamurti Dehinosmin yatha dehe Kaumaram yauvanam jara Would anyone like to try to check?
Dehinosmin yata dehe Kaumaram yauvanam jara Tatha dehantara pratir Irastatranamuyate.
Dehina, of the embodied. Asmin, in this. Yatha, as. Dehe, in the body. Kaumaram, boyhood. Yauvanam, youth. Jara, old age. Tatha, similarly. Dehantra, of transference of the body. Prapti, achievement. Dira, the sober. Tatra, thereupon. Na, never. Muyati, is diluted. Translation by His Divine Grace, Peace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body of death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Now we'll read the purport by Srila Prabhupada, and then we'll speak a little something about it. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing its body at every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet, the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates into another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on the account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering, according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in their next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there is no cause of lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the super soul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a gira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained, on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable against the principle of the supreme soul's being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally, sanatana, and are called shara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after the liberation of the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the supersoul, who is present in each and every individual body. It is known as Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities, and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then their relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy, Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other being the instructed. Such instruction would be useless because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior position to the living entity, Arjuna, who is a forgetful soul deluded by Maya. Om Gyam Dharam Kasya Shakaya Chakchu Vidhantina Kasmai Shri Guru Maha Shri Chaitanya Manavishtam Sthatam Bhutades Abdeham Shri Guru Shri Vaikunam Shri Guru Vaishnavascha Shri Guru Sadhyatam Sadhanaratam Vitantam Sadhyatam 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 Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Sahajam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. So thank you all for staying after the Sandhya Arti to hear a little bit about Bhagavad Gita. The whole subject of us not being the body is in one sense very simple and straightforward in terms of us theoretically understanding, but actually fully realizing it may be a different thing. If we were to go across the room and ask anyone here, probably all of us have experienced the loss and the birth of someone or other that was close to us. Has anyone raised your hand not experienced the birth of someone close or the loss of someone close? I don't think so. So this is a fundamental, universal, at least materially universal aspect of our existence. And it's interesting, even as devotees, those of us who have been, studying this and to some extent realizing it, the happiness of having someone apparently connected to us, the birth of someone brings the greatest joy. And then conversely, losing someone who is close to us can give us the greatest distress. So Krishna is teaching us here that, actually it's coming and going is not worthy of distress. But we also have to be careful on how we process that. It's not that we're cold-hearted, that we're robots and don't have feelings. After all, when it comes to, say, the loss of a spiritual master or spiritual mentor, which I underwent personally, nobody will fault you for having some sentiments and having some feeling of loss and hurt. When Srila Prabhupada left the planet, in fact, many devotees had extreme sadness, as they should. So how do we process this? Is it okay to have being disturbed in this loss when it's a family member but not the spiritual master? Or when it's a family member but not a fellow devotee? How does that work? And if we think about it briefly, I think part of the equation is, what is it exactly that we're feeling sorry for? Are we feeling sorry for the loss of that person? Or are we feeling sorry for ourselves that maybe we didn't, do more? We feel maybe some guilt at all. I should have been a better, brother, sister, mother, father, child. Is that there? Or are we simply just feeling sorrow perhaps for the loss, for not having that direct association like we're used to, missing that person as if they went away to a far place, and we know that at least in the near relative future, we're not going to have a chance to see or talk with them again. In any event, I think if many of us, even those of us who've been practicing devotees, we may think that we, armed with this knowledge, we think that we're at a spiritual position, a point where we can, fully transcend the loss of others. But I think in reality, those of us who might have experienced it find that, wow, we're not quite as transcendental and quite as dira as is mentioned here. We're not as quite as sober-minded as perhaps we thought we were. How many of you have perhaps had that experience where you thought that, okay, this is hard, yes, but I'm armed with this knowledge by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, spiritual masters, and so on. I won't be affected. Anyone think that they wouldn't be affected or less affected? So how did that work out for you? You still are affected. Yeah. So the point I want to get through here is, on one level, yes, we're going to be affected, but we should analyze why particularly we're affected. I mentioned at least 3 reasons that may be there. And then what we can do in doubling down in our sadhana, our service, our spiritual practices, in order to have a greater understanding of what's going on. Srila Prabhupada also mentions here this aspect of the jiva, or the soul, and the paramatma, the super soul. So it's explained how in the heart we reside as a soul. This body, we have a subtle body and a material body. The material body is made of these gross elements. The subtle body is mind, intelligence, and ego, or false ego. But these are just the coverings. You can use a couple analogies. Analogy of like a car. So we as soul, the spirit soul, are the driver of that car. And these bodies, just like a car, over time, they're going to have so much mileage, they're going to break down, they're going to need new tires. And ultimately, at some point, the engine or the heart might give out. Not may, but will. And at that point, we need to go purchase a new car or get a new car. This is the reality of our situation in this material world. So we as Jiva are residing in the heart, but then also Srila Prabhupada mentions this super soul. And so it's understood that an aspect of Krishna resides in each and every one as well. And the analogy is often made of this Paramatma or super soul, Krishna, being witness to our activities, like a bird in a tree, just witnessing what's going on. As we go further in the coming days in this chapter, Krishna goes into more and more detail, talking about how we just need to learn this knowledge that we're not the body, and learn to tolerate the happiness and distress, and somehow be more equipoised. And no doubt, as I think those of us who have been involved in this practice to some extent, we do get this solace from this understanding and to the degree of realization that we have, and we are able to, in fact, navigate our way through these challenging times with loved ones, near and dear ones, whether they be family members, other devotees, spiritual mentors, so on. I can speak, at least for myself, that it was very, very helpful in getting through. So I think we can open it up for questions now. Maybe someone would like to, not necessarily just ask a question, but anyone have any realizations or anything, any experience that they'd like to share that would be perhaps relevant and helpful to the discussion. Anyone? Yes.
So how do we process this? Like, what would be the ultimate realization of this world? Like, how would a person act when his dear ones are not there anymore? So if a person is actually realized from this part of the world, how would that person react?
How are they supposed to react? The question is, how are we supposed to react when, like, a family member were to die, lose their body? On one level, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna in this case, because the situation is Arjuna on the battlefield, not wanting to go into battle because he would be he would be responsible for killing family members that were near and dear to him. And so Krishna is responding that actually a person shouldn't be disturbed by these kind of things, because ultimately they're not the body, and so on. So from this position of jnana or knowledge, that understanding should be there, and we should do our best to firmly inculcate that into our being. But there's a difference between philosophically understanding something, like you came here before hearing this verse, you've heard it before probably, and you have this knowledge, you know that, but realizing it and actually embodying it is a whole other thing. So to the extent that we're able to fully embody it, is to the extent that we're less affected by it. But as I said before, nobody would fault you. It's interesting, no one would fault a devotee for the loss of their spiritual master, or like Srila Prabhupada. So why is that? Because we should have appreciation for the spiritual master. It's not that we feel bad for the spiritual master. It's actually a glorious thing, because we have this understanding that they're going on to serve, in the case of our line, our institution, going on to serve perhaps Srila Prabhupada somewhere else, or going directly back to the spiritual world they made it. So in one sense, it can be a very happy thing. But I would say for most devotees in that situation, the loss is not having that direct bhakti, that connection. the Vani or the instruction from the spiritual master is there, but having that personal association will be dearly missed. And on some level, we can also similarly miss the association of our family members. Is that a bad thing? I mean, if we didn't miss a family member, perhaps like a mother or a father, then in some cases we might ask, well, am I ungrateful for everything they did? All the love and all the attention and all the sacrifice that they made. So when you ask the question, how should we process it? I think if we're grateful to our loved ones for whatever, particularly the elders, whatever, help and trials and tribulations they did in tolerating us and doing things for us, I would pretty much say that, wouldn't we be kind of ungrateful if we didn't, have some sort of attachment and some sort of care and feeling home. I wish I could have, been a better son, daughter. Wish I could have, done more to repay all their kindness and things like that. So I think that's good and that's natural. But on a whole other level, we shouldn't be, as Prabhupada mentioned here, we shouldn't be sad in the sense that oftentimes many of the, mundane materialists may be, who don't have this understanding. So lamentation is okay, but we should have lamentation for the right reasons, in appreciation and like that. But we shouldn't have lamentation because we think that person is dead, finished, is no longer existing. There's a difference. Is that okay? Anything else? Yes.
I want to tell a funny story.
Sure. Should we do a mic?
This reminds me of my mother. And whenever we had a new puppy come home, she would always say, let it cry for 3 days, and it'll stop crying. Well, the puppy missed its mom. And recently a friend asked me about something, and I told the puppy story again. I said, just let the puppy cry for 3 days, it'll stop crying. And I'm going through something where there's somebody that I miss a great deal, it's not a death or anything. And I keep on telling myself that story. It's day 1, let the puppy cry. Day 2, let the puppy cry. You'll feel better at day 3. And sure enough, you do. Like you're over the hump at day 3.
There's that saying that, at least English saying, Western saying, that what time heals all wounds.
Yeah, and but that 3 day thing, it really works. I have a pretty strong voice. I don't know if I can just everybody hear me.
It's for the benefit also of the recording. Anyway,
We are recording, so it's better if you can speak up.
But now most of the stores are open. Well, anyway, on top of, can you hear me now?
You switched it.
1, 2, 3.
You switched it. Now it is on. Yeah.
She had it on. What's on? What's on? It's on.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Anyway, the 3 day thing really works, but on top of it, you have to double your chanting. You really do. You have to double your chanting.
Having that foundation of sadhana and that regulation also helps us. It's interesting you bring up this point that many of us in this room are probably aware that, when there's like a death of a family member close to us, based upon one's social order, based on whether one's understood to be Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra, and how the Brahmana's shorter days, What is it for a Brahmana? It's like something like 3 days. See? So why is this? Why is it, this less, time out, so to speak, for a Brahmana relative to a Sudra? And the answer is because the Brahmana is supposed to be more enlightened in understanding these matters, so they're able to process it more quickly. In some situations, some devotees are at a point where they may lose a loved one, and in a more, I guess, ultimate or outward sense, they actually get great solace and benefit by continuing to offer whatever service. Even some pujaris are like that. I know a quite senior pujari who, mother had died, and some may say, oh, it's not good, we shouldn't go on the altar, continue your service. But what we need to understand is not just the rules, but what are the reasons for the rules. There are things such as, like it's mentioned, one of those, offenses in deity worship, not to cry directly before the deity, and you have to have good conscience. But in this case, okay, so what if continuing one service and serving just like we might, we continue chanting and all, what if it gives one great relief and actually happiness? So we need to consider what the purpose and what's behind these rules, and whether to serve or not. It's, we mentioned it earlier this week. There's this verse, what is it? How really all these other rules and regulations are servants, servants of these two main rules, always remembering Krishna and never forgetting. So if there's some service or some spiritual activity that actually helps us to do that more in these troubling times, that should be a good thing. It should be utilized. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samadeva Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Jai Guru Premanand.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna